I inherited my grandfather's 1,000-acre ranch expecting two things: hard work and silence. I wanted the smell of diesel fuel in the morning, the sound of wind cutting through the long grass, and the kind of sleep you only get when your bones are tired from doing something real. But what I got, taped to the rusted iron gate of my own property less than 48 hours after I moved in, was a violation notice. It was printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock, enclosed in a plastic sleeve to protect it from the dust. It informed me, in a font that was trying way too hard to be elegant, that my perimeter fence was non-compliant with community aesthetic standards and that I was being fined $500. I stood there, holding this piece of paper, looking at the fence my grandfather Silas had built with his own hands in 1962, and I just laughed. I thought it was a joke. I mean, my nearest neighbor was a gated community called Darkwood County Estates, a little island of manicured lawns and beige McMansions that sat smack in the middle of my ranch like a blister, but I wasn't in their community. I owned the ocean of grass surrounding their little island. I didn't know it then, but that piece of paper wasn't a joke. It was a declaration of war. And the general leading the opposing army was a woman named Karen Tillmason. To understand why I didn't just rip that notice up and forget about it, you have to understand who Karen was. She wasn't just an HOA president. She was a tyrant in a tennis skirt. She ran Darkwood Estates like a personal fiefdom. I learned about her from George, a retired history teacher who lived on the edge of the development. George came over on my second day, ostensibly to welcome me, but really to warn me. We sat on my porch, drinking black coffee, and he told me about Dorothy. Dorothy Hendricks was 83 years old. She'd lived in that neighborhood for 30 years, long before it got fancy, long before the HOA was formed. Her late husband had built their house. Her pride and joy was a rose garden in the front yard, a chaotic, colorful explosion of heritage roses that smelled like heaven. Karen decided the roses were messy, George told me, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. She passed a new bylaw requiring uniform landscape architecture. She fined Dorothy $50 a week, then $100. Dorothy lived on Social Security, son. She couldn't pay. She couldn't afford to rip them out. The fine stacked up. Karen put a lien on the house, a house that was fully paid off. She foreclosed. She kicked an 83-year-old widow out of the home she built with her husband over $1,200 in fines for flowers. Where is she now? I asked. Nursing home, George said, staring into his coffee. State-funded. She's fading fast. And the worst part? Karen bought the house at the foreclosure auction through a shell company. She rents it out now. Makes a profit on Dorothy's misery every single month. I looked out at the rolling hills of my family's land, feeling a cold knot of anger tighten in my chest. My grandfather believed that land was a responsibility, that you look out for your neighbors. Karen Tillmason believed land was a weapon. I decided right then that I wasn't just going to ignore the fine. I was going to look into the history of Darkwood Estates. See, my family has been on this land since the 1920s. When I sat down with my grandfather's lawyer, an ancient man named Mr. Miller who smelled like old law books and peppermint, he handed me a file that was thick with dust. Your great-grandfather, Miller said, polishing his spectacles, was land rich and cash poor back in 25. He leased a 50-acre parcel in the center of the ranch to a developer. It was a 99-year ground lease. Standard stuff for the time. I froze. A lease? That's right, Miller smiled, and it was a shark smile. The developer never bought the land, Silas. He rented it. The lease expired on April 1st of this year. We sent notices to the Darkwood HOA legal team for 2 years reminding them. They never responded. I sat back in the leather chair, my mind racing. The lease had expired. The contract was clear. That meant the land hadn't been sold. It had reverted. So, I said slowly, who owns the land under their roads? Under their clubhouse? Under that fancy park they have? Miller tapped the file. You do. You own every square inch of common ground in that neighborhood. Their houses belong to them, but the ground they walk on to get to their mailboxes? That's yours. I walked out of that office with the deed in my hand and a plan in my head. But I'm a fair man. I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen didn't know. Maybe the lawyers had failed her. I decided to try diplomacy first. That was a mistake. I was driving my truck down the main access road, which, remember, runs through my property to get to their gate, when I saw a white Lexus blocking the lane. Karen was standing there, arms crossed, tapping her foot. I rolled down the window. Can I help you? You're the squatter in the old farmhouse, she said. No hello, no introduction. Just venom. I sent you a violation notice. Your fence is still up. And this truck? It's a commercial vehicle. We don't allow those. You need to turn around. Ma'am, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I'm Stu Proudfoot. I own the ranch. I live here. I don't care who you are, she snapped. This is a private community. We have standards. If you can't afford to maintain your property to our level, you should sell it to someone who can. Now move this junk heap before I call the sheriff. She was standing on a road I owned, telling me to get off my own land. You really want to call the sheriff, Karen? I asked. That's President Till Mason to you, she sneered. And yes, I think I will. She pulled out her phone. I just nodded, put the truck in park, and poured myself a cup of coffee from my thermos. Go ahead. I'll wait. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Fuller pulled up. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had dealt with Karen Till Mason one too many times. He walked over to us, hitching up his belt. What's the problem here, Miss Till Mason? He's trespassing, Sheriff, she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. He's harassing residents. He's driving unauthorized vehicles on private roads. I want him arrested. Fuller looked at me. Stu, you causing trouble? Not me, Sheriff, I said. I'm just trying to check my fence line. But since President Till Mason here brought up the subject of trespassing, I think we should clear something up. I reached into my glove box and pulled out the certified survey map Miller had given me. I spread it out on the hood of my truck. Sheriff, I said, this is the original plat for the Proudfoot Ranch. And this, I traced the red line, is the 50-acre parcel leased to Darkwood Estates. Karen scoffed. We know where the neighborhood is, you idiot. Right, I said. But did you know the lease expired 2 months ago? Karen went dead silent. Her eyes flicked from me to the map. That's a lie, she whispered. We own the common areas. The HOA owns them. Not anymore, I said. The lease reverted. As of April 1st, I own the roads. I own the park. I own the gate you're so proud of. In fact, Sheriff, legally speaking, Karen is currently standing on my driveway and harassing me. Sheriff Fuller leaned in, squinting at the dates on the document. He looked at the county seal. He looked at Karen. Ma'am, Fuller said, his voice deep and gravelly. This looks official. If this lease is expired, he's right. This is private property. His private property. Karen's face went from pale to a shade of red that defied physics. This is a forgery. This is a trick. I will sue you. I will take this entire ranch. You can try, I said, folding the map. But until then, I'm going to need you to move your Lexus. It's blocking my road. She got in her car and peeled out, gravel spraying everywhere. I thought that would be the wake-up call. I thought she would call a lawyer, realize she was screwed, and come to the table to negotiate. I was wrong. Karen didn't negotiate. She escalated. The next week, I found my new fence cut. Not just cut, shredded. Hundreds of feet of barbed wire snipped into useless ribbons. Then, I found dead rats thrown into my water trough. Then came the violation notices. Dozens of them. Taped to my gate, nailed to my trees. Fines for unapproved structures, noise pollution, my tractor, visual nuisance. She was trying to bury me in paper. She was trying to bully me like she bullied Dorothy. But she forgot one thing. I wasn't an 83-year-old widow. I was a 35-year-old man with 1,000 acres and a lot of free time. I repaired the fence. I installed cameras, solar-powered, 4K resolution, linked to the cloud. And I decided to secure my property. Since I owned the road leading into the estate, I installed a new gate. A big, heavy, steel ranch gate right at the turnoff from the county highway. I didn't lock it. I wasn't going to keep people from their homes, but I put a sign on it. Proudfoot Ranch, private property, access by permission only. That night, my phone buzzed. It was an alert from the gate camera. I pulled up the feed on my tablet. It was 11:30 p.m. Karen's white Lexus was idling at the gate. 2 men got out. I recognized them from George's descriptions, Todd and Gary. They were Karen's enforcement committee. Big guys, soft around the middle, the kind of guys who peaked in high school football and never got over it. Gary was holding a pair of massive bolt cutters. I didn't call the cops. Not yet. I walked down the driveway. I moved quietly, sticking to the shadows of the oak trees. I stepped out onto the gravel just as Gary was fitting the jaws of the cutters around the hinges of my gate. Evening, gentlemen, I said. Todd jumped about a foot in the air. Gary spun around, dropping the cutters. "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "And you're attempting to destroy private property. That's a felony." Karen stepped out of the car. She was wearing a tracksuit, looking like a mob boss on a day off. "We are removing an illegal obstruction," she hissed. "Get out of our way, Proudfoot." "It's my gate, Karen. On my land. Handle him, boys," she said, waving a hand. Todd stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Look, pal, just walk away. We don't want to hurt you." He reached out and shoved me. It wasn't a hard shove, just a disrespectful one. A know-your-place shove? I took a deep breath. "You touched me. On my land. After breaking in." "Yeah." Todd sneered. "What are you going to do about it?" He drew back his fist. I didn't wait. I stepped inside his guard and hit him once, a short, sharp jab to the solar plexus. Todd folded like a lawn chair, wheezing, gasping for air on the gravel. Gary looked at his friend, looked at me, and raised his hands. "I'm just the driver, man. I'm done. Get him in the car," I told Gary. "And Karen? Smile. You're on camera." I pointed to the infrared lens glowing in the tree above us. Karen looked up, her face twisting in horror. She scrambled back into the Lexus, and they dragged Todd into the back seat and sped off. The next morning, I went to the sheriff's station with the footage. I didn't press charges yet. I just wanted it on record. But I knew this couldn't go on. Karen was telling the neighborhood lies. She was telling them I was a criminal, that I was trying to steal their homes, that the lease thing was a myth. I needed to cut the head off the snake. I needed to talk to the people. I rented the county community hall. I sent a registered letter to every single homeowner in Darkwood Estates. The letter was simple: important legal notice regarding your property rights and road access. Karen tried to stop it. She sent out emails claiming the meeting was a scam, a trap. But fear is a powerful motivator, and when people hear their property value is at risk, they show up. The hall was packed. 300 people. Karen sat in the front row with her arms crossed, flanked by her 2 remaining loyal board members. She looked smug. She thought she could shout me down. I walked up to the podium. I didn't look at Karen. I looked at the crowd. "My name is Stu Proudfoot," I said. "I'm your neighbor, and I'm here to tell you the truth that your HOA president has been hiding from you for 2 years." I clicked a remote. A massive projection lit up the screen behind me. It was the survey map. "This is my ranch," I said, "and this red box is your neighborhood. It sits on 50 acres that was leased in 1925 for 99 years. I let that sink in. That lease expired in April. The land under your roads, your park, and your clubhouse, it reverted to me." The room erupted. People were shouting, looking at each other. Karen stood up, screaming, "Lies. It's all lies. He's trying to scare you." "I'm not done," I said into the microphone, my voice booming over the chaos. I clicked the remote again. "This," I pointed to the screen, "is an email from the developer's legal firm to Karen Tillmason, dated 2 years ago. It warns her the lease is expiring and advises the board to start saving money to buy the land or negotiate a new lease." The room went silent. Dead silent. Karen froze. "She knew," I said. "She knew for 2 years. And she did nothing." I clicked again. "And this," I said, "is the HOA Reserve Fund financial statement. 2 months after she got that warning, $50,000 was withdrawn. It was marked as consulting fees paid to a company called K&T Solutions." I looked directly at Karen. K&T Solutions is registered to Karen Tillmason's brother-in-law. The company was dissolved 3 months later. The sound in that room, it wasn't anger anymore. It was the sound of a mob realizing they had been robbed. "She stole your money," I said. "She stole the money that was supposed to save your neighborhood, and she let the lease expire. She lied to every new buyer, telling them the HOA owned the land free and clear. That is fraud." Karen tried to run. I'm not kidding. She actually tried to bolt for the side exit, but she was blocked by a wall of furious neighbors. George was there, standing in her path, looking like an avenging angel. "Sit down, Karen," George said. The meeting ended with a vote of no confidence, so unanimous it was almost funny. The board was dissolved on the spot. But Karen wasn't done. A narcissist never accepts defeat. They just get more dangerous. 3 nights later, I got a text from George. "Watch out. She's meeting with a guy. Black pickup truck. Looks bad." I called Miller. I called the sheriff. But I knew they couldn't do anything until a crime was committed. So I waited. At 2 a.m., I saw headlights on the access road. Not near the gate. They had cut across the pasture. A black truck. It stopped near my barn. The old wooden barn where I kept the hay and the tractors. It was a tinderbox. I grabbed my shotgun, loaded with rock salt. I'm not a murderer, and ran out the back door. I saw a figure walking toward the barn carrying a jerry can. I could smell the gasoline from 50 yards away. I racked the slide of the shotgun. The sound is unmistakable. Clack, clack. The figure froze. Drop it, I yelled. He dropped the can. He turned around. It wasn't Todd or Gary. It was a guy I'd never seen before, hard-looking, tattoos on his neck. A pro. On your knees, I ordered. Now. He complied. I held him there until the deputies arrived. His name was Ray, and Ray didn't have any loyalty to Karen. He sang like a canary the moment they offered him a deal. He told them everything. Karen had paid him $5,000 to burn down my barn. She told him, make it look like an accident, but make sure it hurts him. They arrested Karen the next morning. They led her out of her house in handcuffs, wearing her silk bathrobe, screaming that she was a victim, that I had set her up. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the financial records, the testimony from Ray. She was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit arson. While she was sitting in jail awaiting trial, I decided it was time to heal the neighborhood and maybe have a little fun. First, I dealt with the HOA assets. The clubhouse and the pool sat on my land. Technically, I own them now. The new board came to me, terrified I was going to bulldoze everything. I'll make you a deal, I told them. I'll buy the clubhouse and the pool equipment from the HOA for $50,000. They looked confused. Why? Because that's exactly how much Karen stole from you, I said. Take this money. Use it to pay Dorothy's nursing home bills. Pay off the lien Karen put on her house. Make it right. They agreed. Then, I took down the fences. I removed the gate at the front of the neighborhood. I took down the private property signs. I replaced them with a new sign, hand-painted on reclaimed barn wood. Darkwood Community Park. Open to the public. I opened the pool to everyone in the county. $3 a day. Kids from the trailer park down the road, who had never been allowed to even look at Darkwood Estates, were suddenly doing cannonballs in the deep end next to the doctor's kids. And then, I did one last thing. A petty thing? Maybe. But satisfying. There was an easement, a 10-foot utility strip that ran right behind Karen's house. It had been overgrown for years. I cleared it out. I put down gravel. And I put up a sign, Public Dog Walking Trail. It ran directly behind Karen's prize-winning, immaculate backyard. Every morning and every evening, a parade of dogs and their owners walked past her patio. Karen was convicted 6 months later. She got 4 years for the arson conspiracy and another 2 for the fraud. She had to sell her house to pay the restitution. The day the for sale sign went up in her yard, I was sitting on my porch, watching the sunset. George walked up the driveway, holding 2 beers. You hear the news? George asked, handing me a cold one. About Karen? Better, George smiled. Dorothy, we got the lien lifted. The sale of her house was reversed because it was based on fraudulent fines. Her niece moved in to take care of the place. She's bringing Dorothy home next week. She's going to spend her last days in her own bedroom, looking at her garden. I felt a lump in my throat. That's good, George. That's real good. We sat there in silence for a while, listening to the distant sound of kids laughing at the community pool. It didn't sound like a fortress anymore. It sounded like a neighborhood. You know, I said, my grandpa used to say that good fences make good neighbors. George took a sip of beer. Maybe, but sometimes, tearing them down makes better ones. I looked at the open gate, the busy park, the road that was finally free. Yeah, I said. I think he'd agree with that. Karen tried to build a kingdom on control and exclusion. She thought power meant keeping people out. But real power? Real strength? It comes from opening the gates. It comes from realizing that we're all just walking each other home. I still live in the farmhouse. I still run cattle. But now, when I drive through Darkwood Estates, people don't glare at me. They wave. And every time I see a rose blooming in Dorothy's garden, I know we won. So, I have to ask you guys, have you ever dealt with a tyrant who thought the rules didn't apply to them? What would you have done if you found out you own the land under your enemy's feet? Would you have been as nice as I was? Or would you have closed that road on day one? Let me know in the comments. I read them all. And remember, check your property lines. You never know what you might own. Thanks for listening. Stay free.